Let's now bring in Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross. From an invest, Bryan, to a tropical storm. Seems like Erin was eager to form.
Yeah, I was a little surprised, actually. They pulled the trigger on the satellite called the scatterometer, which is kind of a radar from space, the Doppler radar, where we can see the winds. I didn't see a west wind measured there, but they felt confident enough. And looking at the close-up visible satellite, like a photograph, you can kind of make out that there is a circulation there. So we'll look at that here in just a second. But there's the system, and you notice that a thunderstorm complex is persisting there. This is a small tropical storm at this point. And because it's small, it can get affected by things. Either it finds a little pocket of conducive conditions and it blows up and it strengthens, or it runs into a bunch of dust, which gums up the works and it weakens. So things are always a little uncertain when you have small systems just developing. All right, 45 miles an hour is the estimate of the top winds, moving west at 20. As you say, that's moving along at a pretty good clip. But storms out there that are caught in the just trade wind flow very often move in that range. Estimated pressure, 1,004 millibars. Obviously, we have no direct measurements out there from aircraft or anything like that. All right, here's that close-up. We put the model analysis of the circulation over it, but that's not absolute. This is what the computer analysis of looking at what data is available is. But if you look at the cloud elements down in here, you can kind of make some out moving that way. I guess that's what they use to convince themselves that there is indeed a circulation, like I said, from the satellite. I didn't really see that. In any case, it's kind of a little bit of an elongated thing according to the computer analysis. And we'll just see as it moves forward here in time if it can maintain this. The thunderstorms, you can see, are kind of on this part of it, where this bottom part, as it quite often is quite sparse at this point. Okay, here's the thinking now going forward. The big question, first of all, is what's going to happen with all this dust? So here's our system here. You notice it's caught in kind of a gap in the dust. Look at that, kind of a gap right in there, and that allowed it to form. But it's moving this way. Now, it's not in the heavy dust. The heavy dust is down here to the south and off here to the west. So maybe it pulls up enough moisture in here that it can kind of push off the dust as it goes this way. But we'll see. Like I said, small systems can go one way or the other very, very easily. So we'll see if this thing really can push the dust away and continue on an intensification process as it heads over into this more pristine environment over here north or near the Caribbean islands. All right, here's the cone as of 11 a.m. from the National Hurricane Center. And notice they're calling for steady strengthening, 60, 70. So this would be tomorrow morning, and here we are Wednesday morning, and then Thursday morning is here. But you can see steady strengthening all along up to a Category 3 hurricane is the estimate here when we get to 5 days. Then the question is it very near the islands and having some effect, or is it well away from the islands? And indeed, we have both ideas from the computer forecast, and that's why we have uncertainty going out in time. But this implies that it is going to just plow through the dust, maybe be limited a bit by the dust, but be able to continue to strengthen. We'll see. I would put some uncertainty on that possibility. But downstream, all indications are that this is going to be a significant storm and a hurricane, whatever it is. So here are the models. Very high confidence here because the track is really simple. High pressure to the north is just going to kind of push it to the west. So everybody kind of agrees that that's the way it's going. And, of course, that's what the cone is based on. And the Hurricane Center uses the consensus for the center of the cone, and that's what we have. And it's, so essentially everything is falling in line here for the next 5 days. Then after that, things get kind of fuzzy. But even then, when we look at the variety of these most modern computer models that we have, and we're looking at the AI models for the first time this year, so we really have question marks on them on how well they're going to do. So far, they seem to be doing okay. Everything has been jumping around, including the AI models. But you notice it's a pretty healthy cluster right in here that is kind of reflective of the end of the cone. Notice that the Google AI models, all the blue ones, tend to be a little farther south. The GFS, the dark reds, tend to be a little farther north. The European Center AI tends to be a little wider, a little more uncertainty, and so forth. So with the best evidence we have is just the overall idea, and the cone reflects that level of uncertainty. Why do we have uncertainty? Well, like I said, the steering is very obvious for now. High pressure to the north is going to push it this way. Then it gets into this area here where the X was. Notice, by the way, the strongest winds where the pink is there are on the northern side of the circulation, which is really good for the Caribbean islands. Has to come pretty close to them really to get a lot of effect in terms of wind. Now, in terms of moisture and storm surge or whatever, it could very well get from that flow from the north. But anyway, getting back to the steering, so here we are now, and then what's going to happen when we get to Saturday? There's the time frame up there. Well, the high is going to kind of split because a front coming in here and a dip in the jet stream like that going to make an opening in here. The question is, what is the nature of that opening? Is the high like this, like we're showing it here, or is it a little bit farther over this way, and therefore it drives this more this way before it starts to turn? These are the questions that we don't know the answer to at this point, and that's why we have uncertainty. So what's the real nature of that uncertainty? Well, let's go ahead and look at it as we let the computer forecast, the variety of computer forecasts that give us this sense of the amount of uncertainty, move forward in time. So here we are again. This is, why does it say Saturday there? This coming Saturday. Yes, Saturday. Okay, now we're going to go ahead to next Monday. So a whole week from now. So this is a long time in the future. Obviously, we just have uncertainty because of the time frame. And you notice that when we get to Saturday, they tend to spread out some. We get a bigger envelope there. Still, the Google model tends to want to keep it to the south. Others, that's the European up there, the kind of lighter reddish orange there. But notice even the European is kind of spread out in a lot of possibilities, although the concentration is up here. All right, let's go forward now all the way to Wednesday. So this is 9 days out. Lots of uncertainty always. And notice all the way from east of Bermuda here to threatening the southeast, with the consensus being offshore, although Bermuda would have to be watching this closely. So this is where we stand. The consensus is that this is going to be well east of the U.S., but in the long term, we don't look at the consensus. We look at plausible scenarios. And we still have a plausible scenario here because if the system does not strengthen as much, then it generally gets caught more in the trade wind flow, which is more east to west, and that would tend to drive it over in here, and maybe it would intensify later. So anyway, all that is way downstream. There's nothing you do with this except kind of educate yourself and just be ready in case something weird happens. But, let's hope it turns north. But right now, we're just going to focus on the next 5 days. It ends up in the vicinity of the islands. And obviously, folks in Puerto Rico and Antigua and the various northeastern Caribbean islands need to watch us very closely for the end of the week. Yes?
Yeah, I think in the near term, that would be the focus, right? Navigating the weekend. And we were talking here, Bryan. I mean, you're looking at a week and a half out for potentially something getting close to the eastern seaboard. And everybody knows, and Stephen put it correctly, I think, what happens between now and Saturday, people watch, but they're like, okay, there's more concern and more interest of what happens once we get closer to the Caribbean and towards the eastern seaboard, and the answers just aren't very clear right now. Though Stephen asked you earlier when it came to interest in the Gulf, it does look like everything's being favored to turn north and away from the Gulf at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a threat in the Gulf. I mean, the thing is, there are so many moving parts here because you have the atmospheric moving parts, and then you have the storm itself, and the intensity and the steering interact. So you know, as I wrote this morning, there really is nothing actionable here. And in the past, we wouldn't have even shown all this because we wouldn't have had the tools to show it. So the main thing is just, you know, look at it with interest, but, you know, let's just stand by, and we're on a timetable here where we don't really try and project more than about 5 days in advance.
We'll be standing by.
Every
You throw
day.
AI in the mix, and now we've just got a couple of more forecast models
There
to
you
now
go.
show, which is wild and great to be informed. I think that we're empowered with information. So, Hurricane Specialist Bryan Norcross, thank you. Appreciate that update.